let me say this too, like you can do all of the things and sometimes your body is just going to do what it's going to do anyway. So these are the things that we can do to help things along, and it's okay if our body is just doing what it's doing. Trust the process. But as long as you have these things available to you and you can use some of them, then hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for your body to go into labor when it is induction time, if that is something that becomes necessary for you. Okay, this week's episode is going to be straight from you guys back to you guys. So these are going to be all of your questions answered right here on the podcast. So we have grabbed all of the questions that we feel like we're getting the most or that we think will be the most benefit to our listeners, and we've put them all in a podcast with me answering you directly. But before we get started, let's hit that reviewer of the week, which this week is Charlie LD13. That was it. Who says, the best podcast. Not sure if a review gets any better than that. She said, I absolutely love this podcast. I listened to it throughout my entire pregnancy and it brought me knowledge and reassurance, which allowed me to have the most amazing all natural birth. So thank you, Charlie. So excited you're here. And you guys, when you leave me these reviews, I might just read it at the beginning of an episode. So please go do that now if you haven't before. And thank you to everybody who absolutely has contributed to that. Now, you asked me lots of questions. Like I said, this episode is chock full of them. These came from Instagram. This is our private My Essential Birth Facebook group. Some of these questions came from there, which I thought were so good. And emails. Any way that you've contacted us, we've grabbed our favorites and we hope your favorites too. The first thing I want to tell everybody to do though is if you have not downloaded that exercise guide, you guys, it is not about getting sweaty or building all kinds of muscle or whatever. It is about helping your body be prepared in the most comfortable and perfect way for birth. It's about positioning your baby right. It's about having the right strength and the right flexibility in the right places for when it's labor time. So if you haven't done that yet, head to myessentialbirth.com/3-exercises and grab those today, or myessentialbirth.com and click the free cheat sheet right at the top. So let's dive in. These questions are in no particular order. So we just kind of wrote them all down, all the ones that we thought were going to be best, and now we're going to answer them. Number one, should you let your provider break your water? Now, this comes up quite a bit. And the problem with this question is if you're not ready for it when it's labor time, the question happens after. In retrospect, should I have let my provider break my water? Now, there's a couple of questions or a couple of reasons that this question comes up. Number one, people are wondering either for induction, is that a good idea? So should you choose to have a medically induced labor for whatever reason, whether that is you personally just feel like it's time to have your baby or whatever, and you choose to have the induction that way, or there is a medical necessity that is saying it is absolutely time, you need to have an induction. One of the things that they offer for induction is a breaking of the waters. They call it a more natural, quote unquote, way to get things moving, meaning they're not having to put medicines and things up there, or they choose to do it later in that induction process, whereas they have put medicines up there. They have put a Foley bulb up there. So they have dilated and ripened the cervix. And now they're wondering boom, let's get labor started with breaking the bag of waters rather than Pitocin or also with Pitocin. So that's one of the places, and I'm not going to get into all of the answers behind all of that. That's a separate podcast. But let's talk about that breaking of the bag of waters for that particular purpose. If you are planning on, or you're wondering if you should break the bag of waters in regards to induction as a way to get things moving for induction, let me tell you what the pros could be. The pros could be you break the bag of waters, and that does stimulate contractions, whether or not you've had the Pitocin or you've had the Foley bulb or the other medication that helps ripen the cervix. Let's say that it gets things going and contractions start naturally and you don't need Pitocin, or if you were using Pitocin and you break the bag of waters, you can turn it off because your body kicks in. That would be the pro. The con is once that bag of waters is broken, you are likely put onto a time limit before they say, baby's not coming, we don't see enough progress, we have to call it a cesarean now. So it definitely does put you on a clock, specifically in a hospital setting and specifically with an induction, because you're going to have all kinds of stuff hooked up to you and vaginal checks that are happening throughout that time that allow more of a risk for infection. So even with a gloved hand with sterile gel, when they do a vaginal exam, it always brings in a risk of infection because you are pushing bacteria from one area, even good bacteria in the vaginal canal, into the uterine area where it's not supposed to be, even though it's good bacteria. So also it can introduce bad bacteria. But even if it's just the good bacteria, it still has the ability to cause some infection and other things. And once that infection starts, that's when we see mom has raised blood pressure. She's got a fever. They start talking about, if we can't get this down, now baby has to come out. Obviously, it's hard on the baby. So that can lead, the cons would be it leads to a cascade of interventions that you just never wanted in the first place. The other reason that moms are offered let's break the bag of waters, and one of the things that they hope happens either with induction or later in labor, if things are quote unquote not progressing as they would like, or just to speed things up in general, you might be told, if we break the bag of waters, baby's head's just going to come right down. And you know what? Sometimes it does. And sometimes it doesn't. So if it does, great. And also if it does, it can be a little bit more intense because you have taken away that cushion. I mean, it sounds like such a small thing, like it's just a little bit of water in this like amniotic sac that's holding it like a balloon. But that little bit of cushion can make a big difference for the sensations that you're feeling during labor. So it can definitely make things a little bit more intense. That means it can also speed labor up, get your contractions longer, stronger, closer together really quick, and get baby out faster. So that is all part of the options that can happen there. Also keep in mind, if maybe you're not wanting to speed things up or get things moving in that moment and everything is safe, baby's fine, mom's fine, then you don't have to do that either. And if you're not wanting that, it could definitely create some of that. The other thing is, if they break the bag of waters, sometimes baby's head doesn't come down. We talk about station. So you have your ischial spines in your pelvis. They're the bony prominences that when you sit down on your bottom, you feel them. Those are the bones, your sit bones. And when baby is zero station, that means the top of their head is level with your ischial spines. Now, if your baby is negative station, I always think of negative as like not closer to being born. Positive, okay, we're coming on down. So if the baby's a negative station, then they are even higher up in the pelvis. And so when they break those bag of waters and baby's high up in the pelvis like that and they don't want to move, well, same thing. Now you've increased the risk of infection and baby's head isn't moving down. So the intensity is probably, even though baby's head isn't moving down, the intensity is probably still more intense because you've lost that cushion, but also the progress might not necessarily be there. So now you're going to be having a labor for an extended period of time where baby is not going to be there, but things are more intense. So it's all just a matter of trying to figure out what you feel is best for you and trusting your body and your baby in the process. Even if you break a bag of waters and baby's head comes down and everything gets moving, would it have been fine to not do that in the first place? It really comes down to what you want to do. There's no reason to rush birth most of the time unless we create one. So keep that in mind when we're talking about breaking the bag of waters. We do talk about broken bag of waters and if that happens at home and what you can do. That is a separate story, but when you are having somebody manually break them, there's definitely some risks involved and some good things should you choose to do that for those specific good reasons that I discussed. One of the questions we got too was about the birth course, and this is a common one because a lot of moms, you guys find me a little bit later, which is totally fine, but this is like I'm 36 weeks, do I have enough time to finish it? And because it's set up as an 8-week course. And the answer is absolutely yes. If this is something that matters to you and you're going to put the time and effort in for the next couple of weeks, yes. In fact, when you purchase the course, reach out to me individually and I will help you work through exactly what you need to do. But we actually have a 4-week course of study that when you dive in, you can just get started right away. But if you are, I know moms are concerned like, yeah, but what if I go into labor at 38 weeks or 39? First of all, will I finish the content? And secondly, will I have what I need? And the answer is yes, you can, but you're going to have to put in some work and I'm going to help you navigate that. So make sure that you reach out to me if that's you. But yes, like I can't even tell you how many moms jump in those last couple of weeks where they're like, oh, shoot. Yes. Okay. I need something now. So yes, it's there to help you. When should I start the 3 exercises? This comes up all the time. Start them now. I don't care if you are not pregnant. You can start doing these right now. So it is ingrained in your mind that this is what I do every day, morning and night, hopefully morning, midday, night. and you can continue on even through your postpartum. No need for the forward leaning inversion if you are doing it postpartum, but you can stick with the pelvic tilts and the squats. And I talk to you about exactly how to do them. And I have a video walkthrough for you and an audio, and I break down the pieces of like what the benefits are, why you should do them, and why they're so beneficial for helping you have an easier, more comfortable labor, which is always the goal, right? Okay, when do I start red raspberry leaf tea? This is one of those things. It is completely safe to drink your entire pregnancy. However, if you notice uterine activity, because some women are going to be more sensitive than others, and it's across the board on all different kinds of things. But with red raspberry leaf tea, if you notice uterine activity, if you notice it increases your Braxton Hicks, if you're noticing any kind of cramping for sure, anything like that, then you either pull back on how much you're having or you stop it completely until you hit 36 weeks. Once you're at that 36-week mark, drink to your heart's content. And as much uterine activity as you would like to handle during that time. It's not something that's necessary to do. However, it does have benefits, so you can absolutely start it at that time. But for those moms that it has no issues at all, and I've interviewed several where that is the case, you can start it immediately and just enjoy throughout your pregnancy. It tastes really good iced, like iced with honey or hot with honey or hot like by itself. I think it tastes like a mild black tea. In fact, I think it even says it on the box of the red raspberry leaf that I get, the little packets. And I love that because I am not a tea drinker, but I used to be, and I loved black tea. And so I love that flavor. Some women do not like that flavor. So again, you do what feels good for you, but otherwise safe to drink unless you're feeling any uterine activity. Evening primrose oil. When should I start it? This is one of those things I want to make sure that you speak with your provider because I'm not a medical professional and that is not, I'm not your medical professional either. So you need to speak with your provider about how you plan to use it. Some women just take it orally and others do it oral and vaginal, and some just do it vaginal. So you need to speak with your provider, make sure it's safe to do, and then you can start at 34 to 36 weeks and you continue on until you have your baby. The idea behind evening primrose oil is that when it's especially inserted vaginally, it will help soften and ripen your cervix, which is one of those things that needs to happen before your body naturally goes into labor. So I say, especially for moms who are concerned about coming up to an induction, and hopefully I'm not talking to moms that are just coming up to an induction because you're coming up to a quote unquote due date. But if there is a reason that you know you're going to need to be induced, I have gestational diabetes and I'm having to use insulin, and my provider says that like there's things involved where you're like, okay, I know I'm going to be coming up to induction. Great. Let's get your body so much more ready and so much more there for when we're going to be adding those other things that help it get going faster. If you can do that, then your body should move into that induction process and labor a little bit easier. So that's when you would start it. Can I take a sitz bath a few days after birth? Yes. Yes, you absolutely can. Sitz baths should only be hip height. They should not go to where your stomach is because you just had a baby and that area is healing. And so where that placenta detached from your uterine wall inside of your belly area, there's going to be some healing that's happening there. So the little blood clots are forming. It's why you're continuing to bleed and shed the lining and things that are in there. And so we don't want to irritate that by adding heat. Anytime you add heat, that increases blood flow. And so you want to make sure that it is at your hips or lower. So it's really just touching that vaginal area. There's also, you can buy like the sitz bath things online, and I'll put a link in Amazon where you just sit it in your toilet, hot water, and you can dunk directly into it. You can even add herbs like some lavender or other things in there that are really healing for that area. And then we always say afterwards, if you want, spray a pad with some cool lavender and aloe, or do like padsicle, whatever feels good, and apply that afterwards. So with a sitz bath, the idea is you do really hot water, as hot as you can stand, and then you dunk yourself gently in there and you just sit or relax on the toilet until that water is cool, a little bit cooler, and then you're done. So that is all about sitz baths. I can definitely get into some more details on that later, but it's totally safe to do postpartum. Even if you have a cesarean, you can still heal that area downstairs because yes, moms, if you've had a cesarean, you are still healing vaginally, which if you are like me, I remember thinking that feels so unfair, but it is the reality of it. And so yes, you can still be good to your body and help yourself heal by doing sitz bath, even with a cesarean birth. And again, just keep it off your C-section scar. or incision. So we had a mom ask, I am facing a medically necessary induction at 38 weeks. What can I do to best prepare my body and cervix to be favorable for birth? Again, if you are a mom that's been here for a while or you're new here, that's great. Head over, get the 3 exercises because everybody should be doing that and it will help you no matter what. If you go into labor naturally on your own or if you are induced. Make sure that you're staying active and that you're walking. That evening primrose oil is absolutely something that you can start. So you're like, I know I need to be medically induced at 38 weeks. Great. Evening primrose oil time. You can also start dates. So we do 3 big ones or 6 of the little ones, but you do that many dates a day and you can start that actually at 34 weeks. So again, these are all things that you guys, everybody can be doing a little bit earlier in case you do come up to a medically necessary induction, even one that you weren't expecting. And then you can add that red raspberry leaf tea as well. So you have a couple of things that you can do when you know you're coming up to that induction. But if you remember, if you've listened to some of the episodes where we've talked about induction, there's something called a Bishop score. And that Bishop score, basically, they do a vaginal exam and they're checking for 5 things and you get points for each one. And they're checking for your cervix. How open is it? So how dilated your cervix is. How ripe is it? How soft your cervix is. How effaced it is. How thin that cervix is. And then they're checking the station of your baby. How high up or how low is your baby when they put a finger through the cervix. And they're also checking the position of your cervix because before labor time, our cervix is tucked back and away and behind us. And so there's just no reason for it to be like forward and ready to go. So there's a couple of things that they're measuring. Those things, some of it, we have a little bit of like where we can do something about it and others we can't. And even, let me say this too, like you can do all of the things and sometimes your body is just going to do what it's going to do anyway. So these are the things that we can do to help things along. And it's okay if our body is just doing what it's doing. Trust the process. But as long as you have these things available to you and you can use some of them, then hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for your body to go into labor when it is induction time, if that is something that becomes necessary for you. When is it too late in my pregnancy to switch providers? You guys are going to like this answer. Never. Literally never. I have had a mom do it during labor. Get out of my room. You're not welcome anymore. I need a different provider. Obviously, maybe not the best way to do it in the way of hoping to have a good relationship with the provider that's coming in, but it worked out well, and that can absolutely happen. In other words, I'm not saying that as in if you're not liking your provider, just know you can fire him in the middle of your labor. That is not the goal. The goal is to be on the same page with your provider from the beginning. And so know that you want to set that up early on, but maybe you think you have a good provider and then you take the birth course or you're listening here on the podcast and you bring some questions with you and you're like, you know what? I feel like I need to ask about induction dates. I feel like I need to ask about moving due dates or the gestational diabetes test or what it looks like postpartum or what I'm able to do when I get to the hospital. And all of those things aren't feeling right. Well, go ahead and reach out to another provider. I promise you, if you take the time to interview other providers, you will not regret it. It's either going to solidify that you are with the perfect provider, which if you are with the perfect provider, it'd be unlikely that you're having a desire to interview other providers, or you're going to find somebody that you just immediately know that this is it. And it feels so different from what you have that you're like, oh, I feel like I can breathe. This is exactly where I need to be. So please, 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 if you learn nothing else here, be brave and go interview some different providers. And in fact, you can call around and ask for some one-on-one time, even without having to pay for a provider in order to be able to meet them and interview them and ask some really important questions. So remember that you are not married to this person. You don't owe them anything. You are, in fact, it's kind of like their code of ethics, right? They're not supposed to like form a bond or anything like with that client. And so I feel like more in a hospital setting, that's really kind of taken to heart more than, because I'm like, I feel like moms without of hospital births oftentimes form bonds with their midwives and maybe a little bit vice versa. But it does, you'll feel the difference when you find that provider that is supporting you along the way. So that is what I'm going to say about that. Another mom asked, how can I better prepare for the transition phase when it comes to advocating for my desires? That part is so intense, it can be hard to have those conversations. I absolutely love that this mom asked that question because you were right. The thing is, it's easy for us to talk about all of these things that sound so good on paper or that you're learning and you've got in your mind and you're like, yes, obviously that makes sense. But you get in front of somebody in their office, so out of your personal space, you're in their personal space, somebody who is well educated and speaks well and is confident, and you have these questions and all of a sudden you just kind of shrink into yourself, and that's totally normal. And so it is really important that you understand the why behind the question that you're asking, because that's going to give you the confidence that you need in order to have that conversation, that very serious conversation with your provider. I think it makes a difference if you write it down. And I would even write it down and bring those questions with you. I think it would be great if you can bring your birth partner with you, or your mom or your doula or a friend, so you're not in there alone. You don't feel like it's so scary. But if you have a birth partner with you specifically, and you can have this conversation with them and they're there to back you up in case you get into the sticky, scared, wait a second kind of conversation that you're having with that provider, hopefully they can jump in and say, I think she's concerned about this, and we were wondering if whatever the case might be. But it does really help if you've had a conversation with your provider. We kind of talk about bringing that birth map with you, or like some birth preferences, right? You don't want to throw it at them. It's more of a conversation starter to be able to say, hey, I'm thinking that I want to make sure I can wear my own clothes and not have an IV and have intermittent monitoring and push in a seated position, or squatting next to the bed, or whatever you decide to do, that you can have that conversation and feel like the smallest of things are supported, but also the big ones, right? But that they should be paying attention to what you're looking for. Another thing that you can do is having a doula present with you. If you have not thought about hiring a doula, I highly recommend it. I don't think if I ever gave birth again, I would do it without one. As excellent and incredible as my husband is and was, I just think that there's something empowering and special about having somebody there that is fully there for you, advocating for you, on your side, in your corner, holding space for you. So think about that as well. But I do think if you know what your plans are before, and the other side of that is if you're going to bring your birth partner with you, your husband or whoever it is, you want them to understand the why too. Because if you're in that space and you're asking those questions and you're getting a little bit of pushback and they make some quote unquote good points for maybe not supporting some of the things that you're saying, you want the other person in the room that is there for you to not be confused by what he just said or she just said, to what that provider just said. You want them to understand exactly why you are asking for those things, why it's important to you, and what kind of evidence there is behind it to know if it's a safe thing to be asking for. Because when that information comes back, that's when it gets a little scary. And that's when mom's like, oh, wait, you're right. I didn't think about it that way. Wait, that is kind of scary. And it might not be the case. So having the evidence behind that as well. So if you are taking a birth course, which I hope you would jump into the My Essential Birth course, then take that husband, spouse, birth partner, doula, mom, friend, whoever is going to be supporting you, take her with you, him with you, so that they know the whys behind things. I find especially for dads, especially for guys, they love the knowledge that comes with it. They love figuring out and understanding what's going on in the background of things. And it gives them just a clearer picture of why they're supporting what you're talking about and how to do it in the proper way. Okay. How long can mom stay at home after her water breaks and no contractions begin? This is a perfect question. It's going to vary. And it's definitely a conversation to have with your provider, because different providers are going to feel different ways. First thing that you need to do is remember taco. So just think of delicious Mexican food. If your water breaks, that's all I want you to do, because you're going to keep track of the time, amount, color, and odor. So what time did your water break? How much was it? Was it a trickle? Was it a big gush? Is it still leaking now? That kind of thing. What color is it? Is it clear? It should be. Or is it yellow? Is it green? Is it brown? And then what's the odor like? Does it have a smell? Does it kind of smell like salt water? I think it smells like the ocean a little bit, just kind of like salt watery. But if it doesn't, if it kind of has like a foul smell or a putrid smell, like there's like, it's just not a normal scent to it, then some of those things, right? If it is not clear and odorless and all of that, then you need to head to the hospital right away. If it is, then that's when you maybe call in if you would like. If this is something that you have discussed with your provider, they might have you call in and check in, or they might say, after it breaks, if you're, waiting for contractions to come on or your contractions are coming on, then come in at this time. If you haven't had that conversation and you call in, this is what I have found is the best way to have a conversation about this without being told immediately to come in. Because if you call your provider, particularly if you're in a hospital setting, they're always going to say, come in. They want to check to make sure that it actually was your bag of waters. And then they probably want to almost immediately start you on a Pitocin drip. So if that's not what you're looking to do, and waters breaking is not uncommon, and you want to stay at home a little bit longer, then you call in if you would like, and you say, hey, my water broke at 3 p.m. It was totally clear, odorless. I have a pad on. I've been moving around. We're going to stay at home for a little bit, but I just wanted to give my provider a heads up because once these contractions get moving and continue, we're going to head in. Instead of, my water broke, what should I do? It's going to be, come in, let us check you out, all of that. If you come in with broken bag of waters, you're not leaving. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you'd like to spend a little less time at your hospital setting, then that is what you would do, is you would just be at home a little bit, pay attention to baby's movement, let those contractions become long and strong and close together, and then head into your birthplace. So some people say 12 hours, some are going to say 18, others 24. I've seen it go up to 48. It really depends on your provider. At some point, they are going to want you to come in and get checked, make sure you don't have a fever, check your blood pressure, check your heart rate, check on baby. But early on, it really is pretty normal. So also, if you're GBS positive or not, then that would have a bearing on it, because whatever you decide to have, like antibiotics, no antibiotics, that could play a part too. So is fundal massage really necessary? So the funny part about this is if you ask someone who has been out of hospital, they may not even do it at all. I have seen some done and some not. And that's where it's like, is it necessary? In a hospital setting, they're going to have policies and procedures that they follow. Most often, it is expectant management, meaning they are very hands-on about what they're doing. They want to be able to use Pitocin right away to increase contractions so that they can get that clamping down of the uterus, which helps to slow bleeding. And then they also do the fundal massage, which some people are very gentle. Some it feels like they're not doing much of anything. And then others are really rough, where people are like, that was more painful than the birth. I don't ever want to do that again. So there's different schools of thought here. I'm not looking to argue either side, but I will say that aggressive massaging is really not necessary. And I think it's important to work with your providers on that. That's a question to have prior to giving birth. And I would ask the hospital how they handle it, because it's not your doctor typically right after it is. But they're not the ones that are going to be coming in every couple hours and like re-giving that massage. So ask your provider, and then also ask the hospital staff what their plans are. And then same thing, birth center, home birth, you ask your midwives and whoever's going to be at your location there. But there are other ways to stop it. And on top of that, you don't even necessarily need to be using things like Pitocin. Sometimes it is necessary, but it's not always necessary. Even with a hemorrhage, sometimes it is necessary. Sometimes they use herbs and tinctures and a piece of the placenta. There's other ways to try to slow things before we move into more aggressive, being things like Pitocin and pretty intense fundal massage. So that's my answer on that. Now, is there anything I can do to up my amniotic fluid if it's low? This is a good one. And what they will tell you is you need to drink water and drink lots of water. Make sure you have water with a little bit of salt. It's supposed to help keep all of that water in there and really move through your body the right way. I know a lot of people use that liquid IV, and so speak with your provider about that. That might be an option as well. Another option is to do an amnio infusion. Of course, there are risks associated with this because they literally use a saline solution and they go through the cervix and into the uterus and add water into that area. So obviously there are going to be infection risks and they could break the bag of waters, and there's all kinds of things that come with that, but that is an option. The benefit would be, the pro would be, if it goes well, then it just adds more water to that area. Resting can help. And if fluids get too low, you may have to be induced. So it's something that they have to monitor and monitor often. That's if they really get low enough for that to be an issue. So there's all of my answers to some of the most common and most recent questions that we've seen throughout our different social media and within the birth group. If you guys have any more questions, you can hit me up anytime at hello@myessentialbirth.com, or you can reach me at myessentialbirth on Instagram and Facebook. I'm kind of all over the place. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope your question was one of them here that we were able to answer. I will see you next week.